I'm Gideon, and for a long time, I thought I had it all figured out. My wife, Corinne, was the kind of woman who could light up a room just by walking in. Sweet as honey, always fussing over stray cats she'd find near our house in a quiet coastal town in Oregon. She'd bake cookies for the neighbors, volunteer at the animal shelter, and leave little notes on my pillow, things like, "You're my forever, Gid." We'd been married 8 years, and those early days were pure magic. We'd spend weekends hiking the cliffs, her laughing as she tried to keep up with me, or curled up on the couch watching old sci-fi flicks, her head on my chest. Corinne was my home, my best friend. I'm a structural engineer, so my days are spent designing bridges and buildings, making sure things don't collapse. I never thought my own life would need that kind of reinforcement. But about 2 years ago, something shifted. Corinne started pulling away, like a tide retreating from the shore. She'd always been open, wearing her heart on her sleeve, but suddenly she was guarded, secretive. Her phone, once left carelessly on the counter, was now glued to her hand, screen locked with a new passcode. She'd get these vague texts and step outside to answer them, muttering about work even though she was a freelance graphic designer with no set hours. Her trips to the shelter got longer, and she'd come home distracted, barely touching the dinners I'd cook. I'd ask what was wrong, and she'd flash that same warm smile, say, "Just tired, love," and change the subject. But her eyes didn't meet mine like they used to. I tried to brush it off. Work stress, I figured. Maybe she was planning some big surprise, she loved those. But the late nights piled up, and her stories started fraying at the edges. She'd say she was at the shelter, but I'd call and they'd say she left hours ago. Once, I found a receipt for a coffee shop an hour away, dated when she swore she was at a client meeting in town. I'd lie awake, her soft breathing beside me, wondering why my gut felt like it was tied in knots. I loved her, God, I loved her, but doubt started creeping in like damp rot in a foundation. I'd catch her staring out the window, lost in thought, and when I'd ask what was on her mind, she'd just shrug and say, "Nothing, Gid. You worry too much." But I knew better. Something was off, and it was eating me alive. Then came the first real sign of trouble. It was a Thursday, and I got home early from a site inspection. Corinne wasn't there, which wasn't unusual, but her laptop was open on the kitchen table, a rare slip since she'd started guarding it like a vault. I didn't mean to snoop, okay, maybe I did, but the screen was on, showing an email draft. "Can't wait to see you again," it read, addressed to someone named Quentin. No last name, no context, just those words and a winking emoji. My heart dropped like a stone. I stood there, staring, as the room spun. Who the hell was Quentin? I closed the laptop, my hands shaking, and told myself it could be innocent. A client, a friend. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. That night, when Corinne got home, she was all smiles, kissing my cheek and chatting about a new dog at the shelter. I didn't mention the email. I couldn't. Not yet. But the seed was planted, and it was growing fast. I couldn't shake that email. "Can't wait to see you again." It looped in my head like a bad song, gnawing at me for days. I didn't confront Corinne, not yet. I'm a guy who builds things to last, so I wanted solid evidence before I tore anything down. But the suspicion was a weight, pressing harder each time she slipped out with another flimsy excuse. Then, out of nowhere, she threw me a curveball. It was a Saturday morning, and she was sipping coffee at the kitchen counter, all casual in her oversized sweater, hair in a messy bun. "Gid, I was thinking," she said, her voice light, like she was suggesting a movie night. "How about we have Quentin over for dinner tomorrow? You know, my friend from the shelter? I think you'd really like him." My stomach twisted, but I kept my face neutral, stirring my oatmeal like it was the most interesting thing in the room. Quentin. The name from the email. My first instinct was to say hell no, but something stopped me. If this guy was a threat, I wanted to see him up close, size him up, read his face. Better to know your enemy than guess in the dark. "Sure," I said, forcing a smile. "Sounds nice. Been a while since we had company." Her eyes lit up, and for a second, she looked like the old Corinne, all warmth and excitement. "Great. He's such a good guy, Gid. You'll see." I nodded, but my mind was already racing, mapping out every detail of the next night like I was drafting a blueprint. Sunday evening, I was in the kitchen, grilling salmon and tossing a salad, trying to act like this was just another dinner. Corinne was buzzing around, setting the table, humming some tune I didn't recognize. She'd put on a green dress that hugged her curves, one she hadn't worn in years. It stung, seeing her glow like that for someone else. When the doorbell rang, she practically skipped to answer it. I wiped my hands on a towel and braced myself. Quentin was tall, lean, with dark hair and a smile that looked too polished, like he'd practiced it in a mirror. He wore a flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up, and carried a bottle of cheap red wine. "Gideon, right?" he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, but his eyes flicked to Corinne too fast. "Thanks for having me, man. Corinne's told me so much about you." "I bet she has," I thought, but I just nodded. "Good to meet you too. Come on in." At the table, Corinne was in full performance mode. She leaned forward, her eyes sparkling as she talked about Quentin's work at the shelter. "You should see him with the animals, Gid," she said, her voice all syrupy admiration. "He's so patient, so selfless. Last week, he stayed up all night with this injured stray dog, making sure it pulled through. Not many people would do that." Quentin waved her off, but his smile was smug, like he was eating it up. "Oh, come on, Corinne," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You're the real heart of that place. Always going the extra mile, designing those adoption posters for free. A sensitive, caring person like you. Rare find." I wanted to gag. They were laying it on thick, their words dripping with something that felt too intimate for just colleagues. I played along, though, nodding like I was impressed. "Sounds like you two make a great team," I said, my voice steady but my eyes locked on Quentin. He met my gaze for a split second before looking at his plate, like he knew I was watching his every move. I noticed how Corinne's hand brushed his when she passed the salad, how her laugh lingered a little too long at his dumb jokes. My jaw tightened, but I kept my cool, cutting my salmon with surgical precision. After dinner, Quentin offered to help with dishes, but I waved him off. "Guests don't clean," I said, forcing a grin. Corinne jumped in, insisting he stay for coffee. They sat on the couch, talking about some new shelter fundraiser, their heads too close together. I stood at the sink, scrubbing plates, listening to their easy banter. Every laugh, every shared glance, was another crack in the foundation of our marriage. When Quentin finally left, Corinne hugged him at the door, a little too long, her hands lingering on his shoulders. I pretended not to notice, but my blood was boiling. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't hold it in anymore. "So, Quentin seems nice," I said, keeping my tone light, testing the waters. Corinne was brushing her hair, her back to me. "Yeah, he's great," she said, too quick, too cheerful. "Really cares about the animals, you know?" I stared at the ceiling, my mind replaying the dinner, the email, her secrecy. "How long have you two been working together?" I asked. She paused, just a beat too long. "Oh, a few months. Maybe 6. 6 months. Right when her late nights started." I didn't push further. Not yet. But I knew I had to dig deeper. The next morning, I called the shelter, casual as could be, and asked about Quentin. The volunteer on the phone hesitated. "Quentin? He's only been here a couple weeks. Great guy, though." My heart sank. Corinne was lying, and I was done playing dumb. After that dinner, Quentin became a fixture in our lives, like a weed you can't pull out. Corinne started inviting him over all the time, too often for it to feel normal. "He's just stopping by to drop off some shelter paperwork," she'd say, or, "Quentin's helping me design flyers for the adoption event." Before I knew it, he was lounging on our couch, sipping my beer, petting our cat like he owned the place. Corinne acted like it was no big deal, treating him like family, laughing at his dumb jokes, touching his arm when she talked. I'd come home from work to find them at the kitchen table, heads bent over her laptop, their voices low and cozy. "Oh, Gid, you're home," she'd chirp, like I was interrupting. Quentin would flash that smug grin and say, "Hey, man, good to see you." I'd nod, my teeth gritted, feeling like a stranger in my own damn house. I hated it, but I didn't say a word. Not yet. I told myself it was better to keep him close, to watch him. Every time he left, I'd check Corinne's phone or laptop when she wasn't looking, but she'd gotten careful, deleted texts, cleared browser history. Once, I found a photo of them at the shelter, arms around each other, smiling like they'd won the lottery. "Just a work thing," she said when I asked, but her voice was too quick, her eyes darting. I started keeping a mental tally of her lies, each one a brick in the wall growing between us. But I still loved her, or at least the version of her I remembered, and that kept me from blowing it all up. A month later, my birthday hit. I wasn't in the mood to celebrate. Turning 37 felt like a reminder of how stuck I was, my life crumbling while I played pretend. But Corinne wouldn't hear it. "Come on, Gid, you deserve a party," she said, her eyes sparkling like the old days. She was so excited, buzzing about a surprise at our favorite bar downtown, that I caved. "Fine," I said, forcing a smile. "But keep it small, okay?" She kissed my cheek, promising it'd be perfect. I wanted to believe her, to feel that warmth again, but the knot in my gut wouldn't loosen. I should have known better than to trust her surprises. The bar was our usual spot, a cozy dive where we'd go for drinks after work with my crew from the engineering firm. That night, it was packed with familiar faces, my buddies from the office, a couple of old college friends, even our neighbor who always borrowed my lawnmower. Everyone was in high spirits, clapping me on the back, buying me shots. Corinne was the life of the party, flitting around in a red dress that hugged her curves, laughing louder than anyone. For a moment, I let myself relax, leaning against the bar, watching her charm the room. Maybe I was wrong, I thought. Maybe she's just stressed, and this is her way of making it up. Then the door swung open, and Quentin walked in. My blood turned to ice. Nobody else noticed him at first, they were too busy singing happy birthday off-key or arguing over who'd pay the tab. But Corinne's head snapped up like she'd been waiting for him. She bolted across the room, her heels clicking, and threw her arms around him like he was the damn guest of honor. "Quentin's here," she announced, dragging him into the crowd. She introduced him to everyone, her voice bubbling with pride. "This is Quentin, my friend from the shelter. He's the best, saves animals like it's his superpower." People nodded politely, some shaking his hand, but I could tell they didn't get why he was there. It was my birthday, not some shelter fundraiser. Quentin soaked it up, all easy smiles and charm, like he belonged. I stood at the bar, my whiskey untouched, watching the circus unfold. Inside, I was seething, my pulse hammering in my ears. Why the hell was he here? Corinne hadn't mentioned inviting him, and the way she was acting, like he was a celebrity, made my skin crawl. I caught her glancing at me, her smile faltering for a second, like she knew I was pissed but didn't care enough to stop. Quentin sidled up to her, whispering something that made her laugh, her hand brushing his arm. My friends were having a blast, oblivious, but I felt like I was in a different room, watching my marriage unravel in slow motion. I gripped the bar so hard my knuckles whitened, forcing myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to make a scene, not yet. But I knew, right then, that I couldn't ignore this anymore. Something was rotten, and I was done pretending it wasn't. The bar was a blur of noise and laughter, my birthday party in full swing. My buddies were sloshing beers, shouting over the jukebox, and the room smelled like fried wings and cheap cologne. I was trying to keep up the act, grinning through toasts, but my eyes kept darting to Corinne and Quentin. They were across the room, her red dress a beacon, his flannel a stain I couldn't ignore. She was laughing too loud, leaning into him, her hand grazing his shoulder like it was muscle memory. I told myself to chill, to not ruin the night, but every second watching them felt like swallowing glass. Then they vanished. 1 minute, Corinne was giggling at something Quentin said, her head tilted like she used to do with me. The next, they were gone. I scanned the crowd, nothing. The bar's back door led to an alley, and I had a sick feeling that's where they went. Nobody else seemed to notice. My friends were too drunk, belting out Springsteen lyrics or arguing over darts. I stood by the bar, my whiskey sweating in my hand, my heart pounding like a jackhammer. I wanted to storm out, check the alley, but my legs felt like concrete. What if I found them? What then? I wasn't ready to face it, not in front of everyone. My buddy Nate, a structural engineer I've known since college, sidled up, his face flushed from too many IPAs. He clapped my shoulder, then squinted at me, his grin fading. "Yo, Gid, you good? What's with the face?" He leaned in, lowering his voice. "And what's the deal with that Quentin guy? Why'd he and Corinne just bail?" I froze, my grip tightening on the glass. "So someone else noticed." "Bail?" I said, playing dumb, but my voice was tight. Nate nodded, jerking his thumb toward the back door. "Yeah, I saw them slip out a few minutes ago. It looked cozy." "Who is that dude, anyway?" I forced a shrug, my jaw so tense it ached. Just some guy from the shelter. They work together. Nate raised an eyebrow, not buying it. Work, huh? It looked more like they were sneaking off for a smoke. Or something. He let it hang, watching me. I wanted to tell him everything, the email, the late nights, the lies, but I just shook my head. Probably just grabbing air, I muttered. Nate didn't push, but his eyes said he knew I was full of it. I kept glancing at the back door, counting minutes. 10. 20. 30. My mind ran wild. Were they in the alley, pressed against the brick wall? In his car? Somewhere else? Every scenario was worse than the last. I downed my whiskey, the burn doing nothing to dull the rage building in my chest. I wanted to tear the place apart, demand answers, but I could hear my dad's voice in my head. Don't lose your cool in public, Gideon. Save it for when it counts. So I stayed put, forcing laughs with my friends, pretending I wasn't falling apart. About an hour later, the back door creaked open, and there they were. Corinne strutted in, her cheeks flushed, her dress slightly wrinkled, a smile plastered on her face like she'd just won a prize. Quentin followed, looking smug, his hair messier than before, his flannel untucked on one side. They slipped back into the crowd like nothing happened, Corinne grabbing a drink from the bar, Quentin chatting up some random guy like he owned the place. She caught my eye, flashed that bright, fake smile, and raised her glass like we were all having the time of our lives. My stomach churned. I could practically smell the lie on her. Nate was still beside me, watching. They're back, he said, his voice low. Are you sure everything's cool? I nodded, my throat tight. Yeah. Just, don't worry about it. He didn't look convinced but let it drop, heading back to the dartboard. Corinne bounced over, all bubbly, looping her arm through mine. Having fun, birthday boy? She asked, her voice syrupy. I looked at her, searching for a crack in her act, but she was good, too good. Where'd you go? I asked, keeping my tone even. Her smile didn't waver. Oh, just stepped out for some air. It's stuffy here. Quentin was across the room, laughing with someone, but his eyes flicked to us, like he was checking if I'd bought it. I hadn't, but I wasn't going to make a scene. Not tonight. Tomorrow, though? Tomorrow, I'd get answers, even if it meant tearing my world apart to do it. I clinked my glass against hers, my smile as fake as hers. Happy birthday to me, I said, and she laughed, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. The night of the party, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Corinne's soft snores beside me a cruel reminder of how far apart we'd grown. My mind kept replaying her slipping out the back door with Quentin, her wrinkled dress, his smug grin when they returned. By dawn, my eyes were gritty, my head pounding, but I was done playing the fool. I needed answers, straight up. Over breakfast, her sipping tea, me gripping my coffee like a lifeline, I looked her dead in the eye. Corinne, I said, my voice low but steady, are you sleeping with Quentin? Her spoon clattered against the mug, tea splashing on the table. Her face went from shock to outrage in a heartbeat. What? She snapped, eyes narrowing. How dare you, Gideon? Accusing me of something like that? That's low, even for you. Her voice was sharp, like I'd slapped her. I leaned forward, not backing down. Don't play games, Corinne. I saw you two at the party. Sneaking off for an hour, coming back all cozy. What's going on? She stood, chair scraping the floor, her cheeks red. You're unbelievable, she hissed. Quentin's a friend. A colleague. We work together, and yeah, we stepped out for air. You're making something dirty out of nothing. Her eyes glistened, but I couldn't tell if it was hurt or just a damn good act. This is disrespectful, Gideon. I don't have to sit here and take it. Before I could say another word, she grabbed her purse and stormed out, muttering about heading to the shelter. The door slammed, and I was left with the echo of her words and a sinking feeling I had been played. I sat there, staring at the half-eaten toast on her plate, my gut screaming she was lying. Her outrage felt too polished, too rehearsed. I wasn't letting this go. If she wouldn't talk, I'd get answers another way. I drove to the animal shelter, a low brick building on the edge of town, my hands tight on the wheel. The place smelled like wet fur and antiseptic when I walked in. Quentin was there, crouched by a cage, cooing at some mangy dog. He looked up, his easy smile faltering when he saw me. Gideon, hey, he said, standing, wiping his hands on his jeans. What's up? I didn't waste time. Are you sleeping with my wife? I asked, point blank, my voice like steel. His eyes widened, then he laughed, too loud, too quick. Whoa, man, slow down. No way. Corinne and I are just friends. Work buddies. You know how it is. He shrugged, but his hands fidgeted, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. Look, I'd love to chat, but I'm swamped. Got a sick pup to deal with. He gestured vaguely at the cages and started backing away. I stepped closer, my voice low. Don't lie to me, Quentin. I'm not stupid. He froze, then forced another smile. Nobody's lying, man. You're reading this all wrong. He turned, practically jogging to the back room, leaving me standing there, the dogs barking like they were mocking me. I wasn't done. If neither of them would come clean, I'd find the truth myself. Back home, I dug through my toolbox for a small GPS tracker I'd bought years ago for a hiking trip we never took. It was tiny, no bigger than a quarter, with a battery that'd last a week. Corinne's purse was on the counter, she'd swapped bags before leaving, a habit when she was in a rush. I slipped the tracker into a side pocket, deep in the lining where she'd never look. My hands shook as I did it, guilt gnawing at me, but I pushed it down. She'd forced my hand with her secrets. I downloaded the app on my phone, tested the signal, ping, there it was, a dot moving toward the shelter. I felt like a spy in some bad movie, but I was past caring. I needed to know. For the next few days, I tracked her. The app showed her at the shelter most mornings, which checked out, but then she'd veer off, coffee shops an hour away, a park on the outskirts of town, once a motel parking lot for 30 minutes. My heart sank each time the dot lingered somewhere it shouldn't. I started cross-referencing her excuses with the tracker. Late night at the shelter, she'd text, but the dot was at a bar downtown. Client meeting, she'd say, but she was at a residential address I didn't recognize. I drove by that one once, late at night, and saw Quentin's beat-up Subaru parked outside. I didn't stop, couldn't bring myself to, but the sight burned into my brain. Every lie she told, every dot on the map, was another crack in the foundation of our marriage. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was hollow, like the man I'd been was eroding. But I kept watching, waiting, building a case in my head. I'd confront her again, soon, with proof she couldn't dodge. The tracker was a gut punch, but it was just the start. I couldn't keep living in this fog of suspicion, so I went all in on finding the truth. Every night, while Corinne was at the shelter or with a client, I dug deeper. I started with our joint bank account, something I hadn't checked in months because I trusted her. Big mistake. Logging into the app felt like opening Pandora's box. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through the transactions. Over the past 6 months, Corinne had been bleeding our account dry, hundreds here, $1,000 there, withdrawn in cash or spent on things that didn't add up. Motel charges in towns we never visited together. Bar tabs at places she never mentioned. A $200 dinner at a swanky restaurant an hour away, dated the night she swore she was at a shelter fundraiser. All on her card, not Quentin's. I printed the statements, my hands shaking, each line of betrayal I couldn't unsee. I needed more. I called up my buddy Nate, who'd noticed Corinne and Quentin at the party. He's got a cousin, Lila, who works at a bar downtown and knows everyone's business. Over beers, I laid it out, Quentin, the tracker, the money. Lila didn't even blink. Oh, that guy? Quentin's a mooch, she said, wiping down a glass. Lives in a shitty studio apartment near the pier. No job, as far as I know. Hang around the shelter, probably to look good for women like your wife. She gave me a pitying look. Word is, he's broke, always bumming drinks off people. If he's winning and dining, it ain't his money. My blood ran cold. Corinne was footing the bill for her own affair, motel rooms, drinks, dinners, all on our dime. I thanked Lila, left a big tip, and drove home, my mind a storm of rage and grief. Back at the house, I sat in the dark, the bank statements spread out on the kitchen table like evidence in a crime scene. Corinne was still out, probably with him. I thought about the woman I married, the one who'd cry over a hurt seagull, who'd spend hours sketching logos for free to help a friend. She loved animals so much she never wanted kids, and said they were her kids. I was fine with that, I loved her enough to let it be our life. But now? That woman was gone, replaced by someone who lied, schemed, and threw our life away for a deadbeat. The tracker pinged. Her purse was at that same residential address, Quentin's place. I pictured her there, laughing, touching him, using our money to play house. My chest felt like it was caving in, the weight of 8 years crashing down. I wasn't just angry, I was heartbroken, humiliated, a fool who'd built his world around a lie. By morning, I'd made up my mind. There was no saving this. No kids to hold us together, no reason to cling to a marriage that was already dead. Corinne loved her animals, sure, but she'd chosen Quentin over me, over us. I wasn't going to beg her to stay. I called a divorce lawyer, Sally, recommended by a colleague who'd been through his own messy split. She was sharp, no nonsense, and didn't sugarcoat it when we met that afternoon. If she's cheating and draining your account, we've got a strong case, Sally said, flipping through the bank statements I'd brought. No kids simplify things. Oregon's no-fault divorce state, but we can still protect your assets. I nodded, my throat tight. I just want out, I said. Clean break. She can have her animals and her boyfriend. I'm done. Sally gave me a long look, then nodded. Let's get to work. I spent the next few days gathering more evidence. I saved screenshots of the tracker's history, showing Corinne's late-night detours. I pulled more bank records, highlighting every suspicious charge. I even found a receipt in her purse, slipped out when I checked the tracker, for a motel room, paid in cash, with Quentin's name scrawled on it in her handwriting. Each piece was a knife to the heart, but I kept going, fueled by a mix of fury and despair. I wasn't just losing my wife, I was losing the life I thought we had. The sadness was there, heavy as a stone, but the anger kept me moving. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything while I stood there like an idiot. Sally started drafting the divorce papers, and I told her to make sure Corinne got nothing but what she brought into the marriage. I'd built our life, our house, our savings, and I'd be damned if she and Quentin got to enjoy it. A week after I met with Sally, Corinne came home one evening acting like nothing was wrong. I was in the living room, sorting through more bank statements, when she walked in, her hair damp from the Oregon mist, a hesitant smile on her face. She dropped her purse, tracker still tucked inside, and sat across from me, her hands folded like she was about to negotiate a peace treaty. Gid, she started, her voice soft, the one she used to use when she wanted to smooth things over. I've been thinking. We've been off lately, haven't we? I miss us. The way things used to be. My jaw tightened. She wasn't apologizing, wasn't owning up to Quentin or the money or the lies. Just that sweet, syrupy tone, like she could charm her way out of this mess. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Off, huh? That's one way to put it. Her eyes flickered, but she kept going, leaning closer. I know I've been distant. Work's been crazy, the shelter's demanding, but I want to fix this. I love you, Gideon. Let's go away for a weekend, just us. Rekindle things. Her smile was desperate, but I saw through it. She wasn't confessing, she was hedging her bets, trying to keep me on the hook while she held on to Quentin. I'd seen the tracker's pings, her still sneaking off to his apartment, still blowing our money on their little escapades. I felt a cold clarity settle over me, like the fog rolling in off the coast. Corinne, I said, my voice steady, you don't get to play both sides. I know about Quentin. The motels, the bars, our money. You're not fixing this, you're covering your ass. Her face crumpled, but not with guilt. It was panic, like a kid caught stealing. Gideon, you're wrong, she said, her voice rising. I'm not, Quentin's just a friend. You're twisting everything. I held up a hand, cutting her off. Save it. I've got proof. Bank records, receipts, a tracker in your purse. Her eyes widened, and she glanced at her bag like it had betrayed her. You spied on me, she gasped, turning it around like I was the villain. I laughed, bitter and hard. Yeah, I did. Because you lied to my face for months. I'm done, Corinne. I'm filing for divorce. She froze, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You can't, she whispered, tears welling up. We're married, Gideon. We can work this out. I stood, towering over her. You made your choice. You picked him. Now live with it. She didn't follow me when I walked out of the room, and I didn't look back. The next day, I called Sally and told her to move forward, full speed. No mediation, no second chances. Corinne had burned every bridge, and I wasn't rebuilding them. I felt raw, like someone had scraped out my insides, but there was a strange relief too. No more pretending, no more hoping she'd magically turn back into the woman I loved. That woman didn't exist anymore, if she ever had. At work, I threw myself into my projects, designing a new bridge for a coastal highway, the numbers and blueprints a welcome distraction. But the news of my divorce spread fast, small office, big mouths. By Wednesday, Rose, one of my colleagues, caught me in the break room. She's a civil engineer, sharp as a tack, with dark curls and a laugh that could cut through any bad day. We'd always gotten along, but she kept her distance, professionally, because I was married. Now, she leaned against the counter, her eyes soft but direct. "Heard about you and Corinne," she said, no preamble. "I'm sorry, Gideon. You okay?" I shrugged, stirring my coffee. "Getting there." She hesitated, then said, "Wanna grab lunch? Just to talk. Or not talk, if you'd rather." I blinked, caught off guard. Rose had always been friendly, but this was different. There was a warmth in her eyes I hadn't noticed before. Or maybe I had, and I'd ignored it because of Corinne. Part of me wanted to say no, to crawl back into my shell and nurse my wounds. I wasn't ready for anything new, not with the divorce papers barely drafted. But Rose's offer wasn't pushy, just kind, and I was so damn tired of feeling alone. "Yeah," I said finally, managing a half smile. "Lunch sounds good." Her face lit up, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something like hope. Not romance, not yet, just the idea that someone saw me, not the wreck Corinne left behind. We set a time for Friday, and as I walked back to my desk, I realized I was looking forward to it. A break from the chaos, a chance to breathe. Maybe I wasn't ready to move on, but I could at least let myself live a little. Friday came, and I met Rose at a little seafood joint near the office, the kind of place with weatherwood tables and a view of the gray Oregon coast. The air smelled of salt and fried clams, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. Rose was easy to talk to, her dark curls bouncing as she laughed at my dumb joke about bridge stress tests. We split a basket of fish and chips, and she told me about her latest project, a pedestrian bridge with a tricky cantilever design. I found myself geeking out, sketching ideas on a napkin, and she matched my energy, her eyes bright as she suggested tweaks. It wasn't flirty, not exactly, but there was a spark, comfortable, warm, like slipping into a favorite jacket. She didn't pry about Corinne, but when I mentioned the divorce in passing, she just nodded, her hand brushing mine as she reached for a fry. "You're tougher than you think, Gideon," she said, her voice soft but sure. I didn't know how to respond, so I just smiled, my chest a little lighter. For an hour, I wasn't the guy whose wife cheated, I was just Gideon, eating lunch with a friend who saw me. Back at the house that evening, the calm didn't last. I was in the kitchen, chopping onions for dinner, when Corinne burst through the door like a storm. Her face was red, her eyes wild, and she was clutching her phone like a weapon. "You were at lunch with some woman," she shouted, her voice shaking with rage. I set the knife down, wiping my hands, already exhausted. "What are you talking about?" I asked, though I knew exactly what was coming. "I went to your office to surprise you," she spat, pacing like a caged animal. "Thought we could talk, maybe fix things. But Maureen said you were out with Rose." "Rose? Who the hell is she, Gideon?" Her jealousy was so thick it filled the room, and for a second, I almost laughed at the irony. She was the one sneaking around with Quentin, but here she was, acting like I'd betrayed her. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. "Rose is a colleague. We had lunch. And you know what, Corinne? I don't owe you an explanation. Not after your little birthday surprise at the bar, sneaking off with Quentin for an hour." Her mouth opened, then snapped shut, her face paling. "That was nothing," she muttered, but the fight was draining out of her. I stepped closer, my voice cold. "I'm done with your surprises. I'm done with you. I'm filing for divorce, and I'm free to have lunch with whoever I want. Hell, I'm almost free, period." Her eyes widened, and she staggered back like I'd hit her. She clutched her chest, her breathing shallow, and for a moment, I thought she was faking it. Then she swayed, her face gray, and collapsed onto a chair, gasping. I didn't hesitate. I called 911, my voice steady as I gave the operator our address. Corinne was shaking, muttering about chest pain, her eyes glassy with panic. The ambulance arrived fast, paramedics rushing in with a stretcher. I followed them to the hospital, my mind a mess of guilt and anger. Was this my fault? Had I pushed her too far? But then I remembered the bank statements, the tracker, Quentin's smug face. She'd done this to herself. At the hospital, they whisked her into the ER, suspecting a panic attack or maybe something worse. I sat in the waiting room, staring at the linoleum floor, feeling like the world's worst husband and its biggest idiot all at once. While I was there, I overheard Corinne on the phone in her room, her voice weak but desperate. "Quentin, please, I need you here," she said, her words trembling. I couldn't hear his reply, but her face fell, and she whispered, "Okay, just get better soon, right?" She hung up, tears streaming down her cheeks. Later, when I was allowed in, she looked at me, her eyes hollow. "He didn't come," she said, almost to herself. "Said he's busy at the shelter. Wish me a speedy recovery." She laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "He'll see me at work." I didn't say anything, just stood there, watching her unravel. Quentin, the guy she'd thrown our marriage away for, couldn't even be bothered to show up. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but the bigger part, the part that had been lied to, used, and bled dry, just felt done. I left her there, telling the nurse to call me if anything changed. I wasn't her husband anymore, not really. And I was starting to realize I didn't want to be. The divorce finalized on a gray October morning, the Oregon sky heavy with rain. I sat in Sally's office, signing the last of the papers, feeling like I was cutting the final thread of a frayed rope. Corinne got almost nothing. Our house was in my name from before the marriage, the rentals were locked in a trust, and the prenup protected my engineering firm. Sally had nailed her bank withdrawals, proving she'd misused our joint funds, so she walked away with a measly $5,000, barely enough to cover her legal fees. I kept the house, but I couldn't stomach living there anymore, not with the ghosts of Corinne's lies haunting every room. I rented a small apartment in town, a clean slate with a view of the coast, and started moving on. Corinne, I heard through the grapevine, couldn't afford the house payments on her freelance income. She moved into a cramped studio apartment near the shelter, her life shrinking as fast as her dreams with Quentin. Corinne had been discharged from the hospital a few weeks earlier, diagnosed with a severe panic attack. When she returned to the shelter, she'd hoped for comfort from Quentin, but he barely acknowledged her. According to Lila, who still heard gossip from the bar crowd, he greeted Corinne with a distracted nod and launched into a rant about a new litter of kittens, not even asking how she was feeling. Corinne was crushed, her fairy tale unraveling. She'd cry at night, alone in her tiny apartment, realizing Quentin wasn't the hero she'd imagined. He still hadn't looked for a job, content to mooch off her and the shelter's goodwill, living in his dingy studio while she paid for their outings. Without me, she was adrift, her lies catching up to her. Part of me felt a twinge of pity, but it was drowned out by the relief of being free. Meanwhile, life started to feel lighter. That lunch with Rose had been a turning point. We'd laughed over fish and chips, sketched bridge designs, and for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. A couple of weeks later, I worked up the nerve to ask her out. I caught her after a team meeting, her curls tucked behind her ear as she packed up her laptop. "Rose," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "wanna grab dinner this weekend? Like, a real date?" She paused, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Took you long enough, Gideon," she teased, her eyes warm. "Yeah, I'd love that." Saturday night, I picked her up in my truck, her in a green dress that made my heart skip. We ate at a cozy Italian place, sharing a bottle of red wine and stories about our worst projects. She laughed when I told her about a bridge inspection gone wrong, mud up to my knees, and I couldn't stop grinning at her infectious energy. After dinner, we walked along the waterfront, the air cool and salty. She slipped her hand into mine, and it felt right, like a piece clicking into place. We didn't kiss, not yet, but the promise of something new hung between us, and I hadn't felt that kind of hope in years. As the weeks passed, Rose and I grew closer, taking it slow but steady. Work was a lifeline too, my team rallied around me, and we landed a big contract for a highway overpass. Maureen, my office manager, kept things running smooth, and Nate checked in regularly, making sure I wasn't slipping back into the dark. Corinne tried calling once, leaving a voicemail, "Gideon, I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I deleted it without replying. She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. I heard she and Quentin were on the rocks, his laziness and her regret driving a wedge between them. She'd gambled everything on him and lost. Looking back, the betrayal gutted me, but it also woke me up. I learned I'm stronger than I thought, that love isn't enough if it's built on lies. I'd tell anyone in my shoes, trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't wait for proof to destroy you, act, protect yourself, and walk away if you have to. I'm not bitter anymore, not really. Roses laugh, my new apartment, the open road ahead, they're reminders I've got a second chance. Corinne's out there, picking up her pieces, but that's not my story anymore. I'm writing a new one, and for the first time, it feels like mine.